Ilia Topuria spent weeks telling the world he was unbeatable. He celebrated early, talked like the fight was already over, and seemed convinced Justin Gaethje had no chance. Then came the upset, and when it was all over, Gaethje made it clear exactly what he thought about all that pre-fight confidence. Some would argue his words were even more brutal than the fight itself. Let me break it down. Ilia Topuria treated the night before UFC Freedom 250 like a victory lap. He celebrated with family and friends in Washington, D.C. ahead of his lightweight title unification fight against Justin Gaethje. That's not a metaphor. That's not reading into his confidence. That is literally what happened. A video from Happy Punch showed Topuria addressing a crowd before Sunday's main event on the White House South Lawn, with heavyweight boxing champion Alexander Usyk also present, embracing Topuria as fans cheered around him. World champion in his corner, crowd chanting, lights on. The whole setup looked like a post-fight celebration, except the fight hadn't happened yet. "It's not a victory we have to earn," Topuria told his crowd in Spanish. "Victory is already ours." The celebration occurred less than 24 hours before he was set to face Gaethje. He'd done the Instagram bio update thing again, but that was barely visible next to the big victory party he held for himself in Washington, D.C. The bio change, by the way, is a Topuria tradition. He'd maintained this approach in his later fights, as MMA Mania reported. He embraced the same habit before his fight against Charles Oliveira and again before facing Gaethje, including the Instagram bio update and the Washington celebration. While most fighters are in seclusion the night before, mentally preparing, the Spanish-Georgian fighter gathered together all his family and supporters for a big bash to celebrate the win he was about to have. Now look, when you've done what Ilia Topuria has done, some of that confidence is earned. Within the span of 16 months, he needed just 6 total rounds to dispose of future Hall of Famers Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira, each by devastating knockout. When you're collecting legends like that, you get to walk into a room like you own it. The whole sport had basically conceded that point. Topuria had been predicting a first-round knockout of Gaethje at the White House, and the public seemed to agree with that general result. El Matador was as high as a minus 550 favorite at some sportsbooks, with Gaethje a heavy plus 400 underdog. So Topuria had the odds, he had the history, he had the crowd, he had Usyk in his corner, and he had the belt. Topuria was defending the lightweight title for the first time. He knocked out Charles Oliveira in the first round at UFC 317 to become the new champion. He was also a former featherweight champion and one of 11 two-division title holders in UFC history. Nobody in that party room was wrong for believing the numbers said Topuria wins. The momentum said Topuria wins. The history said Topuria wins. But Gaethje wasn't in that party room, and Gaethje had a very different read on what was about to happen. Gaethje had told reporters he wanted to remind Topuria that he is just a human. "I love pressure. I love being the underdog. I love being counted out. And I love the fact that my opponent thinks he is some kind of god or king because I get to bring him down and let him know he is just a human like all of us." He said Topuria heard that and didn't flinch. Speaking to Diario, the champion said he had heard the same talk many times before. "He has the same speech as all my opponents, that he's going to give me a lesson in humility, that he's going to put me in my place, that I'm super arrogant," Topuria said. So that's where things stood. One man was throwing parties, the other was sharpening knives, and somehow the whole thing was about to go down on the South Lawn of the White House with President Trump watching from ringside. By the time fight week landed in Washington, D.C., this wasn't just a title fight anymore. It had gotten personal, very personal, and it had gotten there fast. The two lightweight headliners took to the stage for the UFC Freedom 250 ceremonial weigh-ins in front of a massive crowd at the Ellipse in Washington, across the street from where the UFC would stage fights on the White House's South Lawn in celebration of President Donald Trump's 80th birthday. Topuria and Gaethje, along with the other fighters on the card, squared off for their final face-offs on a theatrical show that featured parachuters, fireworks displays, and an array of patriotic pageantry. But the lead up to that moment had been anything but ceremonial. Ilia Topuria shoved Justin Gaethje in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. as tension spiked in the final news conference before their headlining bout. Right there in front of one of America's most iconic monuments. The champion put hands on the challenger at a press conference. UFC boss Dana White separated the fighters after Topuria shoved Gaethje during the face-off. Gaethje laughed after the incident and said to his opponent, "Look where we're at. Look at this beautiful view, and you want to act like an animal." That moment said everything about these two men. Gaethje laughed. He genuinely laughed. That's the kind of thing that gets in an opponent's head. When you shove somebody and they find it funny. Immediately after the press conference, Topuria spoke with UFC reporter Megan Olivi. She asked El Matador why he got physical with Gaethje during their face-off. "I just told him, don't come closer," Topuria said. "And he told me, 'What? You're gonna punch me?' I was like, 'Yeah.' And he came closer and I just had to push him. If I punched him, he's not going to be able to show up for the fight." Now that's a line. Cocky, sharp, built for a soundbite. But the war of words had already gone much deeper than shoves and one-liners by that point. Topuria had upset Gaethje with a promotional video in which he placed a white rose on Gaethje's casket. Gaethje bit back by alluding to Topuria's recent divorce. A casket with a rose for a man who is still alive and very much training to put you to sleep. That's the kind of move that tells you who someone is. It's not banter. It's a public funeral with you as the guest of honor. On Monday of fight week, Topuria accused Gaethje of crossing a line. After alluding to the divorce, Gaethje argued the line had already been crossed. He claimed Topuria had disrespected him at every turn. "He thinks he's God, and he had a funeral procession for me," Gaethje told CBS Sports. "So, he wants to act like he's so respectful. He's effing disrespected me every chance he's got." Gaethje went further. He talks about himself. He walks around smelling his own farts. That's Gaethje's version of Topuria. Not a champion, not a legend in the making. Just a man drunk on his own hype. And Gaethje had earned the right to say it. Because unlike almost anyone else in that weight class, he wasn't afraid to walk into the fire. Topuria shifted his focus to Gaethje's father, claiming the elder Gaethje had called him a short guy while holding a beer and predicting his son would smash the champion. Topuria closed his message by calling Gaethje an idiot for bringing family matters into their rivalry. Both men had drawn blood before the first punch was thrown. The press conferences had been a war. The social media had been a war. The face-offs had been a war. By the time Sunday night came around, both men had enough personal fuel to power 5 rounds. The blockbuster 155-pound fight headlined the UFC Freedom 250 event with U.S. President Donald Trump in attendance. And on a night that big, on a stage that unprecedented, with that much bad blood between them, this was never going to be a chess match. Someone's going to get hurt bad. To understand what happened inside that octagon, you have to understand what Justin Gaethje was walking into and how close everyone in combat sports came to writing him off. Gaethje, a 2-time interim lightweight champion, had been chasing the undisputed title that eluded him for years. 2 shots at the undisputed belt, 2 losses, both by submission, choked out by Khabib Nurmagomedov and Charles Oliveira in fights that were supposed to be his coronation. Every time the biggest moment came, someone found a way to make him tap. Prior to a win over Fiziev, Gaethje had been knocked out by Holloway in the final second of their 25-minute fight. The final second, 1 punch for going the full 5 rounds, and Holloway stole it with a moment that became one of the most replayed finishes in UFC history. That loss in a BMF title fight could have broken a lesser man. But Gaethje didn't disappear. He earned another shot at the title by upsetting Paddy Pimblett in a unanimous decision win at UFC 324 in January. That one was the door back in. Pimblett was a fan favorite, younger, and the whole fight was built as a showcase for a new generation. Gaethje won it anyway. He was riding a 3-fight winning streak heading in and hadn't lost since facing Max Holloway. 3 straight, all against credible opponents. The rust was off, the focus was there, but the world still wasn't buying it. Topuria was very possibly the best fighter in the world at that point, still shy of 30 years old. Gaethje was 8 years older and had been in literally dozens of brutal wars. He had looked like an athlete in decline against Pimblett 6 months prior. Youth, boxing, momentum, jiu-jitsu, power. So many advantages were stacking up on the side of Topuria that it felt irresponsible not to pick him. The 37-year-old had been the BMF champion, an interim champion twice, and a champion in World Series of Fighting before crossing over to the UFC, but the undisputed title had eluded him. Now, he could add UFC champion to a career ledger that had been marked by being one of the most entertaining fighters in the sport's history. But here's what the doubters kept missing about Gaethje. This man had been in blood fights his entire career and never stopped coming forward. Every war he survived made him more dangerous, not less. Gaethje maximized his height and reach advantages, making Topuria walk through fire constantly to land anything. When a fight got grueling, he was incredibly comfortable in that style of bloody brawl. Gaethje himself credited the multiple title fights he had been involved with for preparing him to pull off the upset. All the experience I've had, I've fought for the belt 3 or 4 times, had a couple BMF championship fights, and experience is king when it comes to these situations, he said. That's not the kind of confidence you script. That comes from knowing exactly who you are in a fight. Gaethje had been in the deepest waters of this sport over and over again, and he always found a way to keep swimming. The question wasn't whether he had the heart. The question was whether he had enough left in the tank at 37 against the most dangerous fighter on the planet to use it. The fight itself was everything the build-up promised, and then some. The lightweight championship clash topped a bill of fights set to take place on the U.S. Flag Day holiday and the 80th birthday of President Donald Trump, who is an avowed UFC fan. The South Lawn of the White House, under the night sky, with the leader of the free world in the front row. There's never been a backdrop like it in the history of the sport. And from the very first bell, both men made the stage look small. Gaethje was able to land some early jabs, but Topuria's hand speed advantage was obvious in the opening minutes. It didn't take long for the two to deliver a wild first round. Topuria landed some big blows, but Gaethje turned it into a slugfest. Gaethje opened with a snapping jab to greet Topuria's heavy pressure. He landed well early, but Topuria cracked him heavily with the first combination he unleashed. Both men traded heavy right hands. The champion was doing what he always does, walking through the fire, applying pressure, hunting for the moment where his power put someone to sleep. Topuria continued to pour on punishment in the second round. He ripped shots to the body with regularity and eventually sent Gaethje to the floor with one. He hunted for different submissions to end the fight, but Gaethje was able to defend them. The American went down with a shot to the body. Topuria followed him to the ground and got into full mount. The Georgian tried to go for the mounted triangle choke. At this point, anyone watching knew exactly what Topuria was trying to do. The same thing he'd done to Volkanovski, Holloway, Oliveira. Get the finish. Cement the legacy. Prove the party was justified. But Gaethje didn't tap. He didn't fold. He fought out of it. The fight turned toward Gaethje in a major way in the third round. He landed a clean right hand that crumpled Topuria to the mat and attempted to end the fight with a choke. Gaethje wasn't able to finish in the third, but he battered Topuria's face. Now the man who'd walked into Washington untouched, undefeated, and untested was starting to look like he'd been in a war, because he had been. Between the third and fourth rounds, Topuria was complaining about his vision due to swelling around both eyes. When questioned by officials, he said he wanted to continue. The ringside physician wasn't comfortable with what he was seeing and tried to call it, but Topuria, the second official, and Mark Goddard seemed to talk him out of it and pressure him to allow the fight to continue. Think about that. The champion was arguing with medical staff to keep fighting. His eyes were swollen shut. His corner could see where this was going. But Topuria, the same man who held a victory party 24 hours earlier, wasn't ready to admit that the script had changed. Both men were